Good afternoon, everyone. Are you ready to rock out with me today? This is going to be such an awesome show. I am very, very excited to have Lee Aaron on the show today. You're in for such a treat. This is the Get to Know Her show, and I am your host, Monica Graves. Before I introduce Lee formally, I wanted to point out a couple of things. This lovely red top that I'm wearing is from none other than our most amazing sponsor, Brenda Badome, and you can check her out at brendabadome.com. Be sure to use the coupon code Get to Know Her for 21% off of your order, which is a huge savings. Also sponsored by Glam Jewels, which we all know and love. Today I am wearing our Three Little Wishes necklace, and thank you so much for your purchases. They're helping Paul Robinson, who is a 44-year-old dad. He has a cancerous brain tumor, and the proceeds from the sales of these $35 necklaces are going to help Paul and his family. We've raised about $800 so far. We are so grateful to you for all your purchases and all of your shares. And I've layered the piece with another new design, which will be launched this week. So if you're on our email list, you'll be getting an email about that. And if you're not, you can subscribe at glamjewels.com. Now, without further ado, I would love to introduce our guest to you guys today. You're about to meet Lee Aaron. I know you remember rocking out to her songs like What You Do to My Body and Metal Queen back in the 80s. Staying true to her brand, today Lee Aaron continues to put out new music and create hard-driving songs about female empowerment. Her new album, Radio On, released this past summer, is packed with catchy tunes that will fill your rock and roll soul. I shed a couple of tears when I listened to her heartfelt ballad, 21. From the new album. Lee has done everything from trailblazing for women in the 80s to raising a family to showing her fans that dreams and creativity never die. Lee Aaron truly is Canada's rock queen, and I'm honored and delighted to chat with her today about her incredible life and career. Let's not wait another minute. Lee Aaron, here she is.
Hi, how you doing today?
Good. You know what I wish I had for you, Lee? I wish I had fireworks, like some pyrotechnics.
I wish I had fireworks too. How am I ever going to live up to that illustrious intro that you just gave me?
Oh, it's all so true. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you.
Know, we'll get into it all, and I have to ask you the first question I ask all of my guests, but I did want to say, to me, just for me personally, one of the most exciting things about interviewing you is seeing that young woman you were all those years ago and all of your power. And I think a lot of us who are now in our 50s, we look back on that young girl that we were in our 20s and late teens, and we didn't feel so powerful back then. And to see you and your career and how you have just stood by this whole female empowerment thing, it's just amazing to me. So I'm really, really so excited about diving into that. But the first question I have to ask you is, when you were a little girl back in Belleville, or maybe when you'd already moved on from Belleville, what did you really want to be when you grew up? Do you remember your very first thought?
A singer.
A singer?
I did. Yeah, I know. A lot of people find that hard to believe, but it's kind of a long story. And I'm writing my memoirs right now, but my mom had some struggles when she was younger. She was from a large family, lost some brothers in car accidents. And so she struggled a little bit with some mental health stuff when she was young, but my mother was a lovely singer. My mother sang around the house all the time when I was a little girl. And when I knew that when my mom was singing, she was happy and it was going to be a good day, you know, and she had a lovely, like my mom sang, I grew up in the church. My mom sang in church choirs throughout my whole life. And she had a beautiful soprano voice. And so I always associated singing with some type of joyful catharsis. And so it just seemed to make sense to me. I remember when I was in kindergarten in Winnipeg, my kindergarten was in a little rec center up the street from where I lived. And at Christmas time, they asked everyone in the class, to do something. They were going to do a little, like a kindergarten Christmas recital for all the parents. And, some of the kids partnered up and they did little puppet shows or whatever and skits. And I was like, no, I'm going to sing, because at Christmas time, my mother always sang Christmas songs, and I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus was one of my favorite. And, and I came home and I'm like, I'm going to sing that in the Christmas recital. Can you teach it to me? And my mom said she tried to teach me the song. She said I practiced and practiced. And she said she was very concerned because she said I was kind of out of tune and, not very good. And she said I would go hide in a closet and practice all the time. And she said the day of the recital, her and my dad came. And she said, when I stepped on that stage in front of an audience, she said she was just like, wow. She said I could really sing. And so I don't really have a recollection. This is my mother's memory, who she's now passed on. But I just remember from the time I was very, very little, just being very, besides the fact that, I always found, I just had a connection with music always. Music made me happy. Music took me out of reality and put me somewhere else. It was like a transcendent kind of connection I always made with music. So from the time I was really little, I knew I was going to do something with singing and writing songs. And I started writing poetry when I was quite little as well. So
you did. That was going to be my next question. What kind of got you into writing songs, and how early did that happen for you? So it started with poetry?
Well, probably when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I moved I'd gone from Belleville to Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was about 9, I moved back to Ontario, and I lived in Brampton, Ontario. And there were a couple of sisters that lived up the street, and Darlene and Colleen Hall. And we had a terrible little group, but I would mostly try to come up with the songs and write the lyrics. And then we'd all get together and I would teach them harmony, and I would try to get them singing harmonies, because I just loved music. And then I won a couple of poetry contests when I was in high school. They got published in the yearbook. So I was just always writing from a young age. And then when I was 15, I was invited to audition for a local rock band, because I was singing in musical theater, and I was very deeply involved in that. And bass player from a local band had seen me sing in a musical production that his brother was doing behind the scenes work on, and asked me to come and audition. So from the time I was 15, I joined a rock band. Yeah.
Great. Wow. And was it all guys in the band? Were you the only?
I was. And
okay.
That was a little bit of a contentious issue in the beginning, because when I auditioned, one of the guys in the band, the more mature, older guy in the band, was like, yeah, she's got the best voice of everyone that we've auditioned. And the other guys are like, well, we never thought of our band with a girl as being the front person, right?
Yeah.
And but they couldn't find anyone who would sing as well as me. So I ended up getting the gig in this band. And when we were searching for band names, when I was, again, 15, 16 years old, we threw a bunch of names in a hat. We wanted a band name like Jethro Tull or Max Webster, and just a name. And we picked Lee Aaron out of a hat. And so that ended up being synonymous with myself. Yeah. And the rest is history. So.
That's incredible. So Lee, at that time, what were your musical influences growing up? What were you listening to in those days?
Well, I had a lot of varied influences. My parents weren't real music gurus. My father listened to Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard, and he liked stuff like that. Roger Whittaker, I think. And my mom loved Anne Murray. And but when I lived in Winnipeg as a young girl, I lived a couple of doors down from a gentleman named Blair McLean. His brother was named Gary McLean. They had a comedy duo called McLean and McLean. I don't know if you remember those guys.
Oh, okay.
From years ago. But they were also in a band with a guy named Burton Cummings, in a band I think it was a band called The Vicious Circle, when they were really young. And so Burton Cummings was a very good friend. So I lived 2 doors down from this sort of rock and roll party house where Burton Cummings was always visiting. And when I was a little girl, and you know what, there was always, it was just it was a very loving and lovely home. There was a Blair and Anne's son, Kevin, was friends with my sister and myself. They lived a couple of doors down. So we just spent a lot of time going back and forth from that house. And it was just like a very bohemian musician house. And I was very attracted to that because my parents were so straight, you know, like they're church going type. And so that was fairly influential on me as well when I was a young girl. Blair used to host these Sunday sing-alongs with the neighborhood kids. He'd come out on the lawn, he'd play his guitar and sing along. Us kids would come down there and we'd, you know, have cookies and popsicles, and he'd have this sing-along circle. And so that was fairly influential on me when I was a kid. But at a certain point in time, I discovered my mom's Diana Ross and the Supremes albums. So yeah, this is cool, you know?
Yeah.
And then eventually, as I got a little bit older, and I've told this story a few times, my father worked at Humber College. And at one point in time, they were getting rid of their vinyl library and switching to 8-track. Bad idea, but it was what they thought was a timely thing. So my dad was going down the hallway and he's like, you saw this big pile of vinyl. And he's like, what are you doing with that vinyl? I think my daughter would like that. So I was about 13 or 14. And one day he just showed up. He had this trunk of vinyl. Because my parents weren't real big vinyl collectors. They had very limited stuff. And in that vinyl, I found like Led Zeppelin and The Who, Heart, The Runaways. And so probably Heart, The Runaways, and Fleetwood Mac were these records I found when I was this. And I was like, wow, these are like girl singers that are rockers. And I was so impressed.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know that when I heard Heart, I was like, that's what I want to do. To me, that music, it was powerful because those girls, to me, managed to blend not only feminine strength and power in songs like, say, Barracuda and Magic Man, but there was a very tender side to what they did as well. So they managed to really, to me, blend the masculine and the feminine and do it really well. They never traded on their sexuality. They played their own instruments. They wrote their own songs. And that was just very, very attractive to me. That's what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Yeah. And you just played with them not too long ago.
Not well. Heart. It was about a decade ago now.
Is it about a decade ago? Okay.
Yeah, I know.
It's not long ago.
I know. Where does the time go?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that was a real thrill. I got to actually play on the same stages at a certain point in time. So, and I got to meet the Wilson sisters, and that was great. Nancy's lovely, super friendly. We talked about motherhood mostly. More than anything, you know. She was still with Cameron Crowe at the time and had her twin boys were, I don't know, 10 or 12 or something at that time. And we spent a lot of talking about motherhood. Yeah. How to make it fit into your rock and roll life, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That I can't imagine that that's an easy feat. But that's the thing about you. You've continued on, like you've done, you know, you've had your children, you're married, but you have always been producing beautiful music all the way through, you know, and I find that fascinating. And also that you had the bravery to take a different direction with your music as well. And at one point you dove into jazz and you explored that. And, you know, that's just, I find that so brave because, you know, I could imagine too, after a while, you know, you're giving your fans what they want, what they kind of expect. And now you're doing something for yourself that's exploring the roots of the music that you were influenced by.
Absolutely. I mean, there were a couple of things that facilitated that. Number one, when grunge happened in the 90s, you know, everybody who was associated with classic rock music in the 80s, you know, it was sort of like your career ended at that point because there was a gigantic shift culturally with music. And, you know, the media, even though I did a couple of albums in the 90s, I did an album called Emotional Rain that had Reeves Gabrels from David Bowie's Tin Machine. Knox Chandler from the Psychedelic Furs. I was trying to me, I just went, oh, grunge can be another brand of my own music. But
Right.
the media doesn't really look at it like that. They go, well, Lee Aaron is that school of rock, and this is the new school of rock. And so it was a very difficult time to get bookings, to get radio play, to get anything. And so I took a year off and did some reassessing. And when I decided to come back, I had no desire to jump back on the pop culture bandwagon at that point in time. And so, yeah, I did some exploration into some music that I loved. When I was doing theater in high school, I had a couple of really, Mr. Vandenberg and Mr. Robinson, a couple of great music teachers that were mentors and that introduced me to a lot of that old Tin Pan Alley writers and a lot of the jazz and blues music of that era, because a lot of it is very influential in musical theater, right?
Right.
And so I kind of went back and started listening to that again. And after about a year, a friend of mine said, this is crazy. You should just go out and sing. You love this music. You should go sing it. So it was more just an experimental phase when it started. Mm-hmm. But within a few months of singing in a few local nightclubs in Vancouver, all of a sudden, the Sun and the Star and all these papers were out reviewing it. And people were saying, you should do a record of this style of music. So it was actually a great period for me, because not only did I get to rediscover this music, embrace it. It was a gigantic learning curve for me as an artist to study that, the musicality, the writing, it's a different type of art form than rock and roll, because there's a lot of improvisation that happens. Not only that, but financially, my career had been somewhat decimated at that point in time, like a lot of rockers in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And so out of financial necessity, I was like, well, I guess if I'm going to make a record, I'm going to have to do it myself. So I went and got gear and I bought Pro Tools, because I didn't have a budget to go into a gigantic studio. But that was like the beginning of learning more about production as well for me, and starting to produce my own albums, which I've also done since the year 2000. So,
oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I love the bluesiness that you can hear in your more recent music as well. Like it's kind of, that sound has carried through. And one song I love that I think is from 2017, correct me if I'm wrong, the song I'm a Woman, where you recognize like all of these powerful women, Audrey Hepburn, Amelia Earhart. Like it's such a great, great song. I mean, it's a real anthem for any woman. I think we should all be listening to that when we get up in the morning to remind us of our power, right? Yeah.
Well, it's a cover, and I decided that's a song that I'd wanted to cover for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
So I was really delighted that I got the opportunity to do that. Of course, we took it as a band and we went, okay, let's give it even more power. We're going to Zeppelinize it, right?
Yes.
That's what the band did. And that song actually is something that it's kind of a showstopper live, I have to say. Yeah. Women come to the front of the stage and they just kind of stand there and they're dead in their tracks and go, yes, this is my song, Yeah. I'm really glad about that,
Oh, that's so great. So you know what, Lee, I want to like take you back, but bring you right forward at the same time, because where I want to take you back to is the whole story around Metal Queen. And what that song was intended to be, and what you had in your mind when you wrote that song. I know it was based on a scene from a movie. If you can sort of walk us through that, and then also kind of what happened at that time for you when you were, pushed to do a video that looked a certain way for the 80s, that was sort of, where you were conflicted, where that wasn't really the messaging that you wanted to convey at that time.
Well, you've done your research.
I just find it so fascinating. And I also wanted to say that watching that video now, all I see is power, like but I could just imagine what was going on at the time, because how old were you when you shot that video? You might like 18 or
21.
21. Oh yeah.
21. The
Okay.
song was written when I was about 20, but
Okay.
so
Yeah. What, tell
I
us
know
about
I
that.
don't want
That's
to be redundant because I feel like I've told this story a few times,
yeah.
but for your listeners, I'm happy to tell it again. I had when I started out, I was discovered by my first manager when I was 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, my husband just recently, we were watching something. I think it might have been the Beatles thing, or I can't remember, but we were watching it and he's going, man, he goes, they're just like total like kids. And he goes, it made me realize, he said, that when you did some of your early stuff, like you were just like a little girl. And I'm like, yeah. I was fresh out of high school. I had no clue about the music industry and what it meant. I wish I'd had a far more secure sense of self at that age. But I think a lot, women especially, I think we all struggle when we're young to grow into ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And we lack we're self-conscious about our bodies, about our looks, about so many things that we, change as we get older. Like, once you get older and you've had your children, you're like, screw it. I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm happy. Yeah. I'm happy in my, like, can finally say it took me it took me till about 40 before I was really comfortable in my own skin. I don't know about you.
Yes.
But yeah, and we struggle with, imaging that's out there. And especially in that era of back in the 80s, it was such a sexist era, and so I got picked up by this manager, and he had, he was trying to get me noticed. So, and again, in his, I don't want to say anything negative about him. In his defense, he was just trying to do what he thought needed to be done to get me noticed, to get me booked in nightclubs. And so, I kind of got, he took me shopping. I kind of got pushed into this sort of realm of doing a lot of very, sex kitten-y poster girl type of marketing and imaging. And which, to be honest with you, I was really uncomfortable with. I wasn't confident about showing my legs or doing any of that stuff when I was that age. I was extremely self-conscious. And so by the time, 3 years into it, I started pushing back and going, I don't want to do this stuff anymore. This is not me. This is not what is comfortable for me. And when I wrote the song Metal Queen with my guitarist, George Bernhardt, the whole impetus behind the song was about women taking their power back, being the matriarch, being the one in charge. Because I was just surrounded by industry men making all these decisions at that point in time. That's the way it was in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And so, that's what that song was supposed to be about, was about female empowerment, being the one in charge, taking your power back. But unfortunately, it was marketed in an era where, I'm sandwiched between, Duran Duran Girls on Film and, the other video, Slippery When Wet, when hosed down, and washing guys' cars. And I mean, I've said this many times. So the messaging was definitely lost on all those 14-year-old fanboys out there at that time. I think now in hindsight, retrospect, it's come full circle where people go, oh yeah, I get it now. And for a lot of people, they did get it at the time, but a lot of people didn't. So it kind of, certainly in terms of the way it was perceived by the media at the time, it was sort of like, oh, just, I was almost treated like a novelty act,
right.
Cute girls singing hard rock, because there weren't any girls in Canada really doing that. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I definitely felt like I had to spend a few years still battling for credibility. Right. Musically and otherwise.
For
So,
sure. You know what's so amazing about this story is that you started with credibility. Like your whole thing when you started was to empower women. And at that very young age of 2021, I mean, when I think back to when I was that age, I kind of felt like I could, I knew it all, I could do it all, but I don't think I felt like I want to empower other women. I want other women to see how awesome they are. Women need to get their voice out there. Like that is very, very powerful, especially during that time, because I think in that time, we weren't living in the 1950s, but we certainly were. I mean, everybody I looked up to was a male figure. I even remember, Lee, like having dance parties in the basement with my girlfriends, and I wanted to be the guy. Like I always wanted to be the guy lead singer and the guy, like I always felt power from men, I didn't feel it as much from women, or I wasn't like a cheerleader for other women at that time in my life. So what was going on in your life that gave you that wisdom at such a young age?
well, thank you for saying that. I don't know that I think I was totally wise, but again, what I can tell you is that I was really empowered by those early Runaways records, the early Heart records, Ann and Nancy Wilson, Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie, Chrissy Hind, even, going, I used to do a whole set of Janis Joplin when I was like 18 years old and we were started out in the nightclubs in Canada. I did a whole set of Joplin and did the whole sort of thing because I was just so empowered by, some of the stuff she was singing about and her whole bluesy persona, that whole, and the fact that she was so free on stage, so I think I was really empowered by these women musicians. And because it was such a male dominated industry, and especially hard rock was 100% dominated almost by men, and I was just a very determined young girl. I was sort of like,
I love it.
What?
And thoughtful too. You were very, sounds, I was going to say, it sounds like you were a real thinker. Like you were really thinking about things, like you were listening to the lyrics and you were, trying to understand what they meant and what the messaging was. And you were making decisions, which is awesome because now, here we are in in 2021 and you are still empowering women with your lyrics. And I love that when you sing, Lee, the way you enunciate and the message is so strong. It's beautiful. Like how you bring that message out. So I did take some notes on a couple of the new songs that have just come out from Radio On. And I wanted to point out these lyrics to you if I can, and maybe we can dive into them. Sure. So the song Vampin', I love that. You know what? When I saw the video, I was like, I want to go to a nightclub right now. So good. So
it's very glammy, Elvis glammy. I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, the glam. Bring on the glam. Yeah. So there were a couple different sections of that song. So one of them is Claim That Pain, Unchain That Blame. And the other is Trash and Smashing Everything Old to Create Something New. These are beautiful lyrics. And now being, women in our 50s and hearing lyrics like that, it's like you were in my brain just reading, what was going on, because I think as women too, we struggle with this, the girl we were to the woman we are becoming, and also taking care of what's going on inside of us and nurturing that little girl, whether she's 5 years old, whether she's 14, whether she's 21. having some grace for her and talking gently to her, and at the same time empowering her and encouraging to show her power and not to be afraid. And like you said earlier, you get to 40 and you're like, okay, you know what? I'm comfortable in my body now. I see what it can do. I'm grateful. But I think it's a slippery slope. We still can slide back to, not feeling that sense of I can, or feeling that you're not enough. So these songs are so beautiful because they're a reminder to all of us to, pay attention and feel the power. And so I just wanted to talk to you about that when you were writing those songs, what you were thinking about and what you had experienced as a woman over 50.
Well, when I was writing, claim that pain, unchain that blame.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of therapy in my life. I don't talk about that openly too much, but
yeah.
My past life, in terms of growing up, I've had some within my family. There's been, and I'm not necessarily just my immediate family, but within my extended family, there's been mental illness and alcoholism, and you get to a point in your life when you're kind of going, I realized that a lot of my thinking and perhaps some of my less than healthy behaviors were because of family conditioning and things that I'd grown up to believe and messages that I'd learned to, the self-talk, right? And, you get to a point where you realize that, I think when you get to a point where you realize, and especially for me, this happened midlife with my children, where I went, no, you know what? I'm it. I can't go back and go, it's because of my mom, or it's because of my dad, or it's because of this thing growing up. I have to take full responsibility for these little humans that I'm in charge of right now. And I don't know if you have children, but
no, I don't, but yeah.
So I have to take full responsibility for not only these little humans I'm in charge of turning out into the world and teaching them good lessons. I am in charge of me now. And until I take responsibility for myself and heal these things and move forward. And again, like I go into a little more of this in my book than I'm willing to explain right now, because it would take too long. But, we all have destructive behaviors, or default thinking that we go back to. And until we really just go, you know what, I just have to embrace, rather than trying to push the pain away, you have to just let it come. That's why I'm saying, claim that pain, right?
Yeah.
You need to embrace it. You need to feel it. You have to push through it. You have to work through it and get to the other side. And then you need to let whatever things that you're holding on to, that you're continuing to carry shame and blame yourself for in your life, it does not serve you as an adult, a mature adult. Yeah. You need to take charge of it, and you need to go, let it go, and you need to work through it and realize that what you're responsible for now is not holding on to that stuff, but to let it go, and to take charge of creating what you today. As of today, you are your own creator. You can create your own reality. You can create. We are our own self-creators. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Your own reality. And when I stopped making excuses for why something couldn't happen, and just, I don't know, a lot of it is really embracing positive thinking as well, and just going, I see that in my future. I want it. I don't have enough money for it right now. Even if that's something as simple as I want to work with Mike Fraser on my next record, because I think he's the best guitar engineer and the best mixer. And maybe I thought he was out of my price range. I'm just giving you an example. Yeah. And then I was nervous to phone him and go, hi, this is Leanne. I love your work. Do you want to work with me on my next record? Just something as simple as that. And letting go of the fear and letting go of all that stuff. And then I made it my reality because, does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. It actually makes me feel how I felt when I sent an email to you. Because, it's like, this is the whole thing. And Lee, thank you for sharing that you've done therapy. I'm doing it right now. I've done it for years as well. And it's so good to have that sounding board and to get that feedback and to be an observer of your life. There's a famous quote from Socrates that says, I think it says, a life unexamined is not a life worth living.
Absolutely.
Right.
Exactly.
And it's so true. And it's so interesting. Like, even in our therapy, we talk a lot about the family system. And my therapist says, every family is a cult. Like, you have to, right. You have to unlearn all this stuff, and you've got to, like you said, create something new. And I think that's just fantastic. And how is it now with your daughter? Because she's 17. What's happening with her? What is she teaching you about being a woman, 17-year-old young woman in 2021?
She reminds me a lot of myself. So I have these days where I go, oh man, am I responsible for that? So, because I see her repeating a lot of things, like she's like a little hummingbird. She's got lots of energy. She's full of anxiety. She's exactly like me at that age, right? She's a super high achiever. She, pushes herself for, with my son, it's all about money. If I get an A, mom's going to give me $50. For her, it's all about getting the mark, right? She's, so I realize that I can't control all of that. I just have to let it go, because how do I explain it? If you haven't done your work with children by about the time they're 10, forget it. It's like you can only do so much. It's funny because my daughter and my son, they're the same in some ways, but in some ways they are absolute opposites. And I've raised them. My husband and I have raised them exactly the same. Exactly. My son is so chill, so laid back, such a cool dude, and my daughter is like a bundle of nervous energy, And I'm going, I don't really know why they're different. They just become who they're going to become. And to a large degree, you just have to let that process go and just try to be a sounding board of good advice for them. You can't control everything that's going to happen in teenagerhood. I know that I'm probably in for some new challenges. Yeah. My daughter's got a boyfriend and she's in a relationship, and I see her doing some things that I don't think are that healthy sometimes. So I'll pull her aside, and if she's open to talking, I'll go, you can set boundaries. If you want to get off the phone and go to bed early, you don't have to let him keep you on the phone. Here's some ways to get off the phone or whatever. I don't know how to explain it, but I didn't have a mother who, I had the 1950s, 1960s housewife mom, right? So she didn't really have any insight for me like that, because she didn't get raised that way, and that's not her fault. But I'd like to think that I have some skills that I'm able to pass along, hopefully, to our children, and my husband as well, because, we've done that. We've gone and we've done the therapy. I know that now in my life, the beauty of therapy is now when I catch myself thinking a certain way, I go, that's not healthy thinking. You have to, or sometimes my husband will tell me for me. He'll go, you're cycling, stop it. I go, oh, I know I am,
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. I heard something else too, like just when you were saying how different your kids are and everything. I've also heard that, even us, with our siblings, we have to remember that our set of parents are completely different parents to each kid. Do you know what I mean? Like, your parents to you are different than they would be to your siblings. Like, we all see them differently. You almost have to treat them as that they're completely different, that we didn't grow up with the same set of parents,
Yes and no. It's funny because my sister and I didn't get along that well when we were young.
Yeah.
We thought I was the city girl, who went into music, who wanted this like cosmopolitan rock and roll life. And she couldn't have been more opposite. She like lived on a farm. She had horses. She was the country bumpkin, you know. And now that we are older, I find that we have far more in common now.
Yeah.
And she, you know, we would connect far better, because you have to remember that as you get older, your siblings are the only people in the world that have the same family history as you, right?
Yes, that's right.
You know, we'll have a good chuckle sometimes about, remember the time Dad did this, you know, you know, and you know, all the big laugh about it, right? Or, you know, oh, do you remember when Mom used to do this? They would go, oh yeah, you know. So this is going to be the only person in the world that's going to make that connection the same as you do, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, that's so true. It's so interesting how like our parents, we were so separated from them. Like you said, it was like that 1950s, 1960s housewife thing. And now, you know, I don't have kids of my own, but friends with children, you know, the same age as your kids, they seem so much, they can relate so much better than we perhaps could. It's like the gap is closed in a little bit from us with our mothers, you know? It's nice to hear you say that.
I mean, there's a little bit of a dynamic these days with some parents wanting to be more like peers to their children. And I have to catch myself too sometimes going, I want to be my daughter to, you know, I want her to hang out with me and want to go shopping and go for lunch or high tea. But I don't expect her to tell me all her secrets, right? Mm-hmm. Because you still have to maintain somewhat of a parent-child relationship, right?
Yeah.
Where, because you want them to respect you. So, you know, I had an incident a couple of weeks ago with our son who, it's again, like my kids couldn't be more opposite. My daughter saves every penny she makes. My son cannot hold on to a dime. So I had this lecture with him and I just said, you know, you are not spending one more penny of your pay. He goes, well, it's my money, Mom. It's my money. Because he's got a part-time job at a pizza place now. And he's making money. And he just spends like crazy. I said, you are not spending one more dime on gaming stuff, any gaming stuff, until your math and Spanish mark come up.
Oh. Hey, everybody. We are back again with Lee Aaron. I'm so sorry. Technological difficulties. It's our electric energy here. So Lee, you were actually talking about your son. That's where I lost you with the job. Spending all his money.
Yeah, I was talking about the hard parenting.
Yeah.
Right? So I was just like, you are not spending one more dime. I don't care if it's your own money. You're not spending one more dime until you get your math and your Spanish markup. Because I'm like, he's just spending too much money and too much time distracted by gaming. It's just the gaming culture, right? Yeah. And, oh my gosh, he was mad. He's like, well, you don't have the right to tell me this. It's my bank account. He's 15, right? My bank account, my money, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but you are not prioritizing school. He stomped down that hallway, slammed his door. Oh, he's like, and I'm like, you know, and then you have that parenting moment where you're like, I was just like, it's like you almost want to apologize because your kid is so furious at you. And then I had to catch myself. I'm going, no, it's okay that he's mad at me because he's going to respect me for this. Right. But it's hard, but you have to be tough. You know, you have to be tough love sometimes. Right.
Yeah. Amazing. And it's great that, you know, your kids they're teaching you too. Right. It's like, it's an exchange of
you're learning as you go. You know how many times sometimes I Google parenting tips on parenting teens because I want to read what are the pros saying that I should do because it's not easy, you know. And one line I always use on my daughter, she gets upset with me. I go, you know, I have a lot more experience being a 17-year-old than I do raising one. So there.
That's good.
It's true, right?
I love it. I'm so glad we're back on here. And I did want to say to the audience, sorry we lost you. If you left questions, just put them back on again, please. And at the end, we're going to answer questions. So I lost your questions. I'm sorry. So Lee, you just started touring again in the pandemic. Well, my God, we got to talk about that.
Go ahead.
Have you done a handful of shows now?
Yeah, I don't know that
Yeah.
I would actually call it touring. I went to Newfoundland
Okay.
in late summer, and I went to Winnipeg last month. I was
Yeah.
supposed to go to Calgary and Edmonton, but COVID numbers got a little bit out of control there. So
Mhm.
my shows got pushed to January. So I'm doing isolated performances right now in
Okay.
places where they have got very strict protocols in place. Like we were not allowed to have a meet and greet at the show at Winnipeg. We weren't allowed to have any friends backstage. So we are doing shows in places where they've deemed it to be safe. And but it's been, I'm so excited to get back out and just do a little bit of playing because I miss performing live so much, right?
Oh gosh, I can imagine. It must be tough. Yeah. And also not being able to go to Europe because you have such a strong following there. Be nice to go to Sweden and all those places where,
Well, fingers crossed that it will happen, but
yeah,
it's like this variant that sounds like a superhero might shut us all down again. Like I sure hope
I
not.
know.
The
Yeah.
Omicron, like it's so hard to tell right
Hmm.
now. But I just rather than in the beginning I was getting a bit bummed out about the fact that oh my gosh, like what am I going to do with myself? I can't play live. Um, I've just been trying to move forward with other things
Hmm.
and find alternate ways to keep myself busy with my craft during this unprecedented time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you. That's great. So I wondered if you would be open to some questions from your fans, from the
Sure.
audience. There, a few questions came forward before we over the week while we were promoting. So I have a couple questions for you, and also I love on your Instagram how you have your Ask Lee. So I'm pretty sure that these questions have not been asked by you yet.
Well, I haven't done Ask Lee in a while. I felt like I was
Yeah.
getting a lot of the same questions. So
Yes.
I'm going to do a bit of a Lee Talks before Christmas.
Oh,
But
good.
yeah, I just felt like I was getting a little redundant. So I stopped for a little while. And we
Yeah.
were just going through so much with, you probably found out that we were selling our property and buying a new
Yeah.
home, which we did, which I'll talk about later. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that's been a kind
Good.
of monopolizing a lot of my time,
Yeah,
moving.
for sure. But the Ask Lee was such a good idea to keep that engagement with your audience and, just to keep them in touch with you because yeah, it's awful. Not seeing live music is the worst. Like if I can think of one thing during the pandemic, it's such a good energy when people come together for music. So Mike Lush, you got to go back in time a little bit here. He says, I think I remember watching Lee Aaron on Much Music. She was backstage at a concert and taking the time to wash the foam end of the microphone herself before the show. She was worried about bacteria on it getting into her mouth. Please ask her if that was a habit of hers or if I'm misremembering.
Oh no.
Is that a thing? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm a germaphobe going way back, so, and one of the things that grossed me out the most was, sound companies are a lot better about it now, but back in the 80s, you'd get a local sound company, they just set it all up and set up microphones and nothing was sanitized. And sometimes I would look at the ball of that microphone and there was literally things stuck in the grill.
Ugh.
And I was just like, oh, I am not singing into that. So that was my thing is I would take the ball off the microphone, pull the foam out of the center of it. I would
Yeah.
take it into the bathroom with a scrub brush and literally wash the entire thing with hot water and soap till it was sanitized. Then I was like, okay, that's good. I will sing into that now. And then I would disconnect the mic and I'm like, opening act or whoever else is on before me, they have to use their own microphone. This is my mic. I'm the only person using it. So
Great.
so he
I'm so-
totally remembers that. Yeah.
That's amazing. And then Johan Hagman, he has a secondary he read Mike's question, and now he's got a question on that.
Okay.
Please ask Lee if she remembers in which city that interview was recorded. You can watch the interview that Mike is referring to on her website under Media, Lee TV, Video Collections, Rarity, Studio, and Live, Volume 1.9, Backstage Profile 1989. I can't get direct link to it for some strange reason. Does that make sense to you? I guess it was in Toronto if it was that Much Music, right?
I think, oh my gosh. I seem to recall, and I could be wrong, I seem to recall that was in the Toronto area because Much did come out. And I think it might have, was it Denise Donlin did that interview?
Oh, okay.
I can't remember. But I seem to recall that we were playing it might have been Carleton. Was it Carleton University? Is that?
Oh, yep. Actually, Carleton is Ottawa. That's Ottawa. So
we were playing a university. That's what I remember. And I remember it.
Okay.
It was, maybe they came to Ottawa. I don't remember.
Honestly,
it's like, I do remember them coming, and I remember it being backstage at a university.
Okay.
But I can't remember which university. So maybe I don't know.
Well, it's somebody's going to, I bet you somebody will say where it was. Someone watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Chris Preston.
Johan Hagman knows more about me than I know about me. So I'm surprised Johan does not know.
Yeah. Well, I guess this is the one thing where he's like, I got to find out.
Okay.
So Chris Preston says, Lee is such a fantastic songwriter. And over the years, she's had so many different and wonderful songwriting partners as well. He has a 2-part question. Okay. What do you feel makes for a successful songwriting partnership? And were there any times over your career where a songwriting session / partnership did not work out?
So the answer is yes to both those questions. It makes so what makes a successful songwriting partnership? There's 2 components there. One is tangible, one is untangible, if that makes any sense. The tangible part of it is that you connect with them as a person, and you get along with them as a person, that you respect them, and that you can reach a comfort level where you're both secure enough and comfortable enough with each other where you're not afraid to lob an idea out there with fear of judgment. So you can just, like the guys in my band and I now, we're at a stage where someone can make a suggestion and we can laugh and go, that's a totally dumbass idea. And everybody we just laugh about it. Yeah. Because if you don't, how do I explain it? I always say there are no dumb ideas. You know, one of those dumb ideas might end up being a great idea, right? Yeah. So where you reach a level of comfort where you can suggest anything and it's not going to get dismissed right away, you know, or your bandmates can go, forget it. I don't like that idea at all. And you're not offended. So you reach a level of comfort where it's a very, like, songwriting is a very intimate process. It's sort of like, you know, undressing in front of somebody for the first time. You're showing your most intimate feelings and lyric ideas and rhyming ideas, and you don't want to be judged, right? You're exposing that, so you have to reach a level of comfort. The other part of it that's kind of the intangible part is that stylistically, I like when I'm working, say, with Dave Reimer or Sean Kelly, my guitarist, I can say, you know, kind of put this kind of a Lindsey Buckingham spin on it, or this spin on it, or wherever. And we just totally read each other's mails musically, where they know exactly what I'm talking about when I say something. And having that kind of a connection musically with a person is not an easy thing to reach. And again, this leads me to the next question was, have I ever had a songwriting partnership that didn't go well? Yes. Back in the 80s, my label, I was signed to Attic Records' Above Water, Pond Water publishing division for publishing, and part of that agreement was I would fly around to Nashville and to LA, and I wrote with various people on various occasions. I had some songwriting partnerships that worked out very well in those circumstances. And there were times when I got tossed into a room with, say, somebody that had written hit songs for somebody else. Maybe they had a great connection, but then I got in a room with them, or myself and John Albany got in a room with them, and we're like, badee. We're like, kind of like, you throw an idea and they're kind of like, they don't get your idea. Then they toss an idea back and you're going, I don't know. That's not really something I would hear on a Lee Aaron record, and you spend a lot of time kind of dancing in circles, and we'd walk away and we might, writing a song with that person's kind of like sticking your finger down your throat and trying to make yourself throw up when you don't have to. Does that make sense? And then we'd write something and then we'd be like, I don't know. It's okay, but it's probably not going to end up on the next record, right? It was it sounds forced. And there's, that's very common. So what I can say is songwriting is it's an intimate process, and that you really need to connect with somebody.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. It's amazing too. That's one other thing I was going to say about getting older. Your body tells you when something's not working. Like if somebody asks me to do something and I don't want to do it, instant hip pain. I'm like, nope, not doing it. It's so, that's great. So you're sticking with your authenticity and Brad Metz wants to know, what can Lee tell us about the direction and style of the album set for a fall 2022 release?
Well, not much. I haven't done the vocals yet. I just got the tracks a few days ago, actually. And then when I went to upload them all at once to one of my other engineer where I'm going to do vocals, my WeTransfer said 31 hours. And I was like, maybe just one song at a time. I have no idea the files were that big, but anyway. What can I tell you? Takes radio on and it takes it to the next level. That's all I can tell you.
Good answer.
So it's radio on steroids. I think that the songs are even better than radio on. And I'm super excited about it. I don't really know what to say. We dig a little deeper in terms of the twisted love songs, and we dig a little deeper in terms of touching on some pseudo political stuff. Yeah. I know people say never write about politics, but I try to do it in a way where it can be framed as, like the song Soul Breaker was written when all the Trump nonsense was going on in the States. But it could also be about a bad relationship. I like to write in a way like that, and we have a song coming up. All I can tell you is the song is called Rock Bottom Revolution. And it's like an anthem, but it's sort of about everything that is wrong with what's going on societally today. Right. But it's a rock anthem. So that's, fans that know me know I like to kind of incorporate stuff like that. So yeah.
That's great. That is very good insight. We're going to be lining up for that. That's so awesome. Johan, he has another question for you. Okay. You know what? I printed his question twice because I didn't want to miss it because I had to do with Mike. So that's good. That's awesome, Lee. And some people have left some nice comments for you, so I want to read you those. Mimi Caris says, hello, Lee, Aaron, and Monica. Nice to see you guys. Chris Preston says hello. And he's got his two-part question, which we answered. Steve Eggers says, love Lee. Steve Eggers is actually a friend of mine who's in a band called The Nines. Yeah, he writes my intro, outro music for this show. Nice. And he also says, as a trailblazer, do you think things have changed for women in the music industry now versus when you started? Which is what we touched on in part one of this interview. Yes. We talked a lot about that. Yeah. Yeah. And actually, speaking of that, as far as new things happening with you, Lee, did you want to talk a little bit about your Christmas album? Because it's December
Sure.
7th. Yeah.
Sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, as well as having Radio On still out and available.
Yeah.
I should do a disclaimer though, and I know I've mentioned this on my Facebook, is that before I talk about the Christmas album, Radio
Yeah.
On,
Sure.
the first pressing of vinyl sold out immediately. I don't know why, but the label must have underestimated how many vinyl we would sell. And I guess vinyl now is backed up pretty much all over the world. There's an issue with plastic supply and also the pressing plants having to downscale their staffing during COVID times.
Oh my God, that's awful.
So just trying to keep up. There's backlogged pressings of vinyl. Vinyl is coming, but it's probably not going to be until the new year. I know, it's crazy. I don't even have my own Radio On vinyl yet.
Jeez.
I know. So yes, fingers crossed it's coming, but yeah. And then Almost Christmas. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited about the new release because we wrote 2 new songs for it, which are super fun. We wrote a song. It was kind of a real neat exercise as songwriters. After the album was released last year, we did it as an independent little release last year because there was no time to put global distribution in place because record companies need at least 4 months lead time. And we decided we were going to record in mid-September. We were like, okay, this is a crazy idea, but it's a Christmas record.
Yeah.
And then after we had done it, what inspired the title last year, Almost Christmas, is that I had just recently watched Almost Famous with my children for the first time about the life and times of Cameron Crowe and getting his first gig working for Rolling Stone when he was young. And I was just so kind of like, I love that movie. It just touches places in my heart, you know? And I thought, when we were looking for a title, I called Sean and I was just like, I've just watched Almost Famous. Why don't we call it Almost Christmas? Because it's like kind of like a Christmas album, but it's really not traditional. So I think Almost Christmas is quite appropriate. And then we'll do a cover with me in sunglasses. And he's like, yeah, great idea. So anyway, it's funny where inspiration comes from.
Yeah.
But then this year, when we were going to release it with 2 brand new originals, we thought, wouldn't it be fun and a fun exercise as songwriters to write a title track called Almost Christmas, right?
Yeah.
So we had the title and we're like, okay, now we're going to set about writing a song called Almost Christmas. And Sean had come up with some really cool chords and then I sat down with it and and then we wrote a song called Almost Christmas, which is about, you know, oh baby, it's almost Christmas. And so a person is waiting for their loved one to arrive home and that is their favorite part of Christmas is that almost Christmas anticipation, knowing their loved one is getting off a plane and coming home. So,
that's beautiful.
We wrote another song called More Fun on the Naughty List, which is pretty self-explanatory.
Oh, that's great. So they can grab these albums now, download. I still put CDs in my car. It's terrible. I'm not on the spot.
Too. I just love getting the artwork and looking through the pamphlet. And I just like, I'm a have and hold person. Like I like having something tangible that I can look through, right? So if you go to the link tree in either my Facebook or Instagram, if you click on that, it says somewhere by Almost Christmas, it'll take you to a variety of links, depending in the world where you are, Canada, the US or Europe, where you can purchase that album. And we've had a little bit of an issue in Canada with Amazon, but you can always click on Amazon.com and get it from there as well. So, yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah. Lee, I've loved talking to you today. This has been amazing. Like I could talk to you for another 3 hours easy. There's so much. You should see all my notes here. I have so many things and it's like, I'm just so grateful. And thank you for, taking the whole tour down memory lane and bringing us to the present time. And, there's so much wisdom you have. And I feel like it's always been there. It's so beautiful. It's like back when you were writing songs, when you first started, you were writing them for your fans today, So.
Well, I'm flattered you say that, and I don't know that I really thought that through at the time. But it's interesting when you go back and you listen to some of like I go back and I listen to some. I don't listen to a lot of my early work, but I went back recently and I touched on a song. There's a song called "Steal Away Your Love," and it's on the Metal Queen album. And I'm going, oh my man, like that is like totally it's a song about sexual abuse, and it's I went like I was writing Me Too stuff in 1984, and I didn't even really realize it. That's the thing, right? So it's interesting to go back and sort of revisit your thoughts and your things but it's nice for me now as a more mature artist to see a connective thread through all of my work, right?
Yeah. And actually, I was going to ask you as well, like when you think about that and how you were writing those things back then, and today, we see that there are women like Alanis Morissette and Shania Twain and Avril Lavigne, and they've all said that you were a huge inspiration to them. How does that make you feel?
Wow.
You're a trailblazer, like,
Yeah, like a big wow. I don't really know what to say. They're such great artists in their own right. And, I guess I just feel if I was able to, punch through some of those walls, those sexist walls and some of those obstacles in the 80s to make it a little bit easier for women to sit down at a keyboard or pick up a guitar and write their own material and have credibility and respect for doing it. I'm grateful.
Yeah. Well, we're so grateful for you. You're amazing. Thank you so much, Lee, for all your time today and for being patient with the technical difficulties. But
it's so fun when you like freeze in a weird position, I guess the internet's okay. Anyway.
I know. So I'm going to put you in our virtual green room for champagne, and I'll come right back to you. But thank you so, so much.
All right. Awesome.
Take
Monica.
care.
Nice, great talking to you.
You too. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and for hanging in there while we went through a couple of technical difficulties. Lee Aaron, oh my gosh, amazing. I think I'm going to be floating on cloud 9 for quite a while after this interview. Please tune in again next week when we talk to another amazing woman, and make sure you go and check out brendabadome.com. Brenda is our sponsor for the show. Her clothing is amazing. She's a Canadian designer. Use the coupon code Get to Know Her for 21% off of your order. Check out my business, glamjewels.com, who also happens to be a sponsor, and grab yourself a 3 Little Wishes necklace, help a family in need. Go to glamjewels.com. And if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. I want you to be part of this little party every day. Take care, have a great week, and keep on showing the world your sparkle. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.